welcome, and good evening. How's it going, Thomas?
Hi, Timoney. Hi, Jason. Everybody's
How are
looking
you?
very well tonight. I have to say, we've all scrubbed up. We're almost getting
Look at us
professional.
now.
Yeah.
God damn, we look good. We're at episode 29.
That's right.
Can you believe that?
Wow.
Best believe.
That's incredible. Really, it really is amazing. 29. When you think of doesn't
When
seem
we
that
did number one, we were like, oh God, what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it came so quickly.
Yeah.
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 We nursed the people during the pandemic.
Yeah.
We minister to the sick.
What there? Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Week in Strange episode 29. Thank you all so much for showing up in the Facebook live chat. I always really appreciate seeing all the comments here. And everybody, welcome back to Timoney this week. And she'll be back on Facebook here real soon. So I'm just real excited to get these stories going with you guys today. And Thomas, I'm really loving your devil shirt there for the devil card. That's a nice one. I like it. So I'm going to hand this mic over to Timoney.
All right, you guys, what you are about to witness is a nightmare. All right. I traveled to Facebook's soulless but popular Metaverse so that you don't have to. The Metaverse is supposed to be the future, so it's got the world buzzing with excitement. Hilariously, though, the prominence of the futuristic buzzword has caused old footage of digital worlds to explode on social media, largely driven by the fact that nobody really understands what the hell the Metaverse actually is. And because the average person doesn't know what the Metaverse is, footage of shabby, lifeless digital universes that look worse than Roblox can pass off as an unreleased cutting-edge tech. In late January, for example, a re-upload of our 2019 Facebook Meta trailer went viral on Twitter, showcasing an awkward social virtual reality app called Horizon Worlds. Everyone thought it was a new announcement from Facebook, except it wasn't. Somehow, this Metaverse fake out has happened more than once within the last year. But going back to the viral ad, it tried to paint Horizon as this open and free place where folks could happily do anything and everything while surrounded by friends all over the world. The happy-go-lucky vibe, excuse me, was out of the good place, the tweet noted, except, of course, the TV show has a nefarious twist that makes the whole thing even weirder. The footage felt very artificial and ended up making a lot of people online kind of uncomfortable. Everyone depicted in the ad was a floating torso of endless smiles, sexless and toothless. But was the actual experience as off-putting and sterile as the ad made it out to be? I decided to jump in and see for myself. First launched in closed beta last year, Horizon Worlds is a free social app that was made available to everybody last month. I spent a few hours hanging out with other people in its oddly bleak worlds, playing bad games and talking about random things. It was a strange experience, but one that I figured many might share as they take their first steps into the nightmare that is the online digital metaverse. After making an avatar and getting walked through a short but informative tutorial, I was dropped into Horizon's main hangout hub. I got on it around 1 o'clock in the morning, so I wasn't sure how many people would even be there. Plus, how many people really wanted to hang out in Facebook's pseudo matrix? The answer was a lot. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised given how well the Oculus Quest fared this holiday season. When I first arrived, I saw a few groups of people hanging out in different parts of the area. I ran over to the closest group, which also contained a Facebook community guide. These are users who help coordinate events within the app and introduce new players to Horizon, while helping with tech issues too. The app uses proximity chat, so as I got closer, I could overhear their conversation, and it was odd. So that was how he fell. It was hard, he broke a leg, and he was in a coma for a few weeks, said one person. Oh my God, was the community guide's reaction to the story. Yeah, he woke up finally. It's a miracle he's even here playing with us. The storyteller concluded his tale before, apparently, the subject of his story responded. I could have died. Then he started laughing. I barged into their group and remained quiet until the guide waved to me and asked how I was doing. I explained that I was fine and also asked how the person fell, as I had missed that part. But before I could hear the story, 2 more people ran in and the conversation changed as folks introduced themselves and joked about their floating avatars not having legs. I spent time running around the various pockets of people in the hub. One person asked me if I knew how to build anything using the game's creation tools. I explained that I just started playing, and thanks to the power of VR, I watched them physically react with sadness. It seemed nobody could help them build their palace. Another group of people talking about ghosts. Apparently, a player had logged in earlier and left after saying she heard a ghost. Since then, the group had continued to share ghost stories. At one point, a kid, I assume, ran up to me and did the sheesh meme and then ran back towards a large tree that can be climbed using teleport controls. After a moment of silence and giggling, the group went back to ghost tales. After some folks left, I headed back to the community guide. She was very nice and had just helped someone fix an issue with their headset's audio. I asked a few general questions, like why the hangout area was still adorned in Christmas decorations in January. She laughed. People keep asking me about that, and I don't know. She seemed a bit frustrated by it, so I apologized and asked if she was being paid by Facebook or Meta for her services. At that point, she seemed a bit hesitant to keep talking to me, and when I asked about how long she usually hangs out in sessions, welcoming players and helping them with tech issues, she explained she loves the community and began moving around to different groups of people. It felt weird to chase after her, so I didn't. But it seems clear that Facebook has community guidelines watching over players' Horizon worlds, which might explain why the general vibe was mostly chill. I only heard a few players swear or make nasty jokes, and nobody said any slurs. Even as numerous players came and went, the overall vibe felt less toxic than I expected, considering how awful Facebook actually is. Maybe having to speak and be around people is enough to keep most assholes in check, or perhaps the ever-watchful eye of community guides is the key. At one point, a player who I had been talking to on and off over the hour I spent in the hub asked me to come play a zombie game with him and a friend. I joined him via a simple hand gesture, and we played what might have been one of the worst zombie shooters I've ever seen. It featured enemies that were barely animated and looked ripped out of a bad Roblox game. The guns also felt terrible, with no feedback when shooting stuff. Apparently, this is a popular community creation. But still, no offense to the person who created it, but it wasn't great. Still, the fact that it was completely free, easy to play, and didn't include too much gore or violence probably explained why so many younger people were there playing it. Though after less than 10 minutes, I bailed because, well, I just had better things to do than play a bad zombie game with 14-year-olds. Not much better, but still. Before I left, I started asking folks why they were here. Some admitted that they didn't have any games to play, so this was a free option to check out. Others had met some folks here that they liked and used this as a way to hang out and chill with them during the ongoing pandemic. When I mentioned VR Chat, another VR social app with higher quality graphics, legs, and recognition that sex is real, some seemed to be unaware it existed. Others had tried it out or looked it up online, and were not into how wild it seemed, which is funny when you consider that many decry Facebook's equivalent for being too lame. The most surprising answer was some folks liked Facebook, Instagram, and Messenger so much that it just made sense to them to use Horizon Worlds too. This was just where their friends hung out, and so did they. I'm surrounded by folks who hate Facebook, the company, and all the shit it has done, so it was odd to encounter folks who still used Meta's various apps every day. A reminder of just how big the world is beyond your Twitter group and Slack colleagues, I guess. By the end of my time with Horizon Worlds, I had come around on it somewhat. I still think Facebook or Meta, or whatever new name they switched to avoid bad press, is the worst company I could imagine owning and controlling popular VR tech and software, much less the future of all tech that might be overlaid on the entirety of the world. Horizon isn't quite as awful as the ad makes it seem, but it is still a hollow corporate shell that has more in common with an office than it does a playground, or any other type of social space a human being would willingly want to hang out in. It's definitely no VR chat or rec room, and for some, that empty vibe won't matter. Based on what I saw during my time in Horizon, a lot of people seem plenty excited to hang out in Mark Zuckerberg's subpar take on the Matrix.
Well, this article automatically reminds me of that one we talked about with the dreams last week. Was that, Thomas, when was it last time we did the thing where it's like it has this idea of like, yeah, I don't know if these people have any kind of actual imagination of their own, and that maybe it's because
internal monologue,
yeah, and that thing of like, oh, maybe that's because there's all the community standard shit going on. I'm like, yeah, but that whole thing in there about community standards and it not being offensive or anything. Like they're just doing like some social engineering here and this mediocrity thing of like, oh, I went and played some stupid mediocre zombie shooter thing, and it's just like this continuous urge towards mediocrity for everyone, of like people being okay with enjoying shitty things and mediocre things. I'm like, wow, it's just this weird social engineering that I think is coming out of the CCP. I want to say that idea of like taking our standards in life and just lowering them down to the point where, mediocrity is something to aspire to, that it's, somehow funny to talk about playing a shitty video game with your friends, but then still fucking doing it,
That picture, the graphic you used, the guy on my right with the green shirt with like his pink, and he looks like every single sort of like soy boy tech head you encounter on the internet, who will have a little slogan like stay home, save lives, or respect all women. They all have exactly that look, and he has that same fake soulless smile with nothing inside him. The smile is like this. It's like that. And that's what they're like in real life. So if you don't have a soul in real life with huge numbers of people that they don't have, this wouldn't seem any different to you. I was going to say something else. Wasn't there a thing called Second Life that used to be just like this, where you could go into an alternative world and idiots were buying property in there with real money that they didn't actually own? It was just digital houses, but they were using real life money to pay for it. So you could beachfront property in Second Life and spending $200,000 on a house that doesn't exist beyond binary code, and talk about what a great investment it was. Well, I'd love to know how to recoup that investment back. I mean, this is the same thing. They'll be starting. What I'm looking at when I see that thing there now is, apart from the fact that it appeals to the soulless, I see a marketplace for just selling stuff. I mean, I can see. I think obviously they've set it up so Facebook will have the corporations coming in and go, "Hi, I'm from Estee Lauder, and we have a new shampoo. I'm from you can test drive a car that you can buy in real life, a little kind of Ponzi electric car in there, something like that." I mean, these people, there's no difference. It's like there's no difference between these people in real life and what those little cartoon characters are. They're the same. So it means their lives have just as much meaning and just as much depth and just as much value, that it wouldn't mean anything. But at the same time, too, there's something kind of demonic about it as well. It's like you crossed over into kind of the astral realms in a place that there's no control over. And, okay, the regular Facebook can be pretty creepy enough as it is. What's this thing going to be like? If they have like, digital gin, like no doubt about it, I've played around with some of these things, emailing me and stuff. And you can tell right away whether it's a guy in Nigeria trying to get your money, pretending to be a hot girl, or this weird thing that's like semi-sentient and doesn't know how to answer questions properly or anything, and has nothing beyond hello, I think you're cute kind of thing. And it's obviously trying to feed off you. So they're going to be like rampant inside there.
Yeah, what you said about the digital gin coming along, it's just that idea of like, as soon as there's enough complexity within the metaverse or whatever this one is called, it's like the entities that make all those fake social media profiles on Facebook are going to start coming around and jumping into those avatars. And I feel like that's a much more dangerous way for people to be interacting with these entities, through some sort of avatar yourself. So if you're going in there with VR goggles on, and then that puts the perceptions of your body into that, the avatar you're playing with, and sympathetic vibration there between the person who's using the VR headset and the person and whatever entities over there in that space with them. It's a little bit easier for them to become mesmerized or hypnotized or mesmerized by whatever that entity is. Because it's when it's on your phone, it's like, or when it's on your computer, you can close Facebook down on your computer, or you can put your phone away and step away from it. But if you're there, with VR goggles on, interacting with this thing, yeah, you're immersed in that space. It seems like that would be a little bit easier for an entity to attach to someone at that point.
And at what point does their real self become their fake self? And vice versa.
Yeah, it's like they become The Sims. Remember when The Sims was really popular? Like, what was that, like in the 90s? Yeah, well, they're not playing The Sims anymore. They are The Sims.
So it's like you delete that program, you delete your Second Life. It's really creepy. The implications for like, sort of like, I think some people think they kind of like are hedging their bets against mortality. That, okay, I'll die in the real world, but I'll live forever in the digital world somehow. There's a lot of that kind of thing goes on. Or I never had a life, I don't have a life of any meaning in the flesh and blood world. Maybe I'll have a life of more satisfaction and meaning in the horizon world. I think a lot of conversation goes on.
Yeah, I see this like this potential or this possibility for maybe some people who get really sucked into this stuff of like, I already know, most people aren't really eating really good food anyways or taking care of their body. And now they're just going to, be beyond total losers in a basement playing video games. Like that headset's never going to come off and they're going to be hooked up to some like IV that's feeding, some sort of liquid fuckery into them just to keep them alive. And they're like 400 pounds and just never leave their house.
This is as old as the hills too. This like kind of like detachment from reality. Do you remember those? I don't even remember. Years ago, you had the Cabbage Patch Kids or the Cabbage Pail Kids. Like
garbage pail. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Couple could adopt a baby, doll, and have it instead of a real baby. And then you had the Pet Rocks in the 70s. And then the Dungeons and Dragons thing, although that got a lot of hassle for no reason back in the 80s, that was true that kids would so identify, and not only kids, adults would so identify with a character that they would actually believe that they were that character in the game. And when it was destroyed on the game board, they would actually kill themselves in real life because everything they wanted was that character in the game. I think a lot of things like that go on. This is different because this time the other side really does talk back. It's not just you and a dialogue inside your skull. Most of them don't have it these days.
Right, interacting with your own weird fantasy, this one.
You'd also have people when you said that they were in there during the pandemic. I think a lot of them, and reading about some of the despondency and some of the horrors that like people, there's some real bad things happen in the IT industry now. It's full of despondency and misery. And it was all brought about by the pandemic. It took people who were already neurotic and super neuroses them. Now, when they said they all went in there to hang out during the pandemic, there'll be a part of them or an element of that subsection who thinks that I'm in that world safe from the pandemic because the coronavirus can't go in there. You'll have a lot of those kind of neurotics as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like all of this was designed. Yeah, like the safe space idea within virtual reality, with everybody hanging out on Zoom and everybody doing those kind of virtual meetups and things. But it's like this idea I've seen them push around and play around with the dating apps of making it a cool thing for people to have romantic relationships with someone they've never met in person and have these kind of like virtual dates and stuff. And it's just like, I think there's this whole packet of trying to, I think their plan was to get more people on board with this so that it wasn't just the trendy people working in the tech industry that were living in the metaverse, but they were trying to get everyone. And I think that it didn't go the way that they planned for it. I think they were hoping by this time, by 2022, by the time things were coming down, that people would have been so invested in the virtual world where people would have like their people that they got married to, that, they got married in a Zoom call and have never met the person before, and they would hang out in the metaverse together and go on dates and things. I think that was the plan, was to ensure that there'd be some sort of universal basic income so that covered, expenses for your IV drip of soy fluids or whatever that they're putting into your body, and then paid for internet connection. And you could maybe spend a little bit of extra money to upgrade your VR headset, but that the universal basic income that you'd get, any money that you made in the virtual reality would be used to pay for stuff for your avatar. So people that, they'd be working in the tech industry somehow and making money, making some kind of cryptocurrency or something where they would be able to buy digital real estate, so to speak, or buy skins for their avatar, or be able to do some kind of bodily sensory integration thing with their avatar to be able to have more of an interface there, so that, this reality here would be reduced down to just getting things delivered through the mail, through Amazon. There still would be people working in the shipping industry and some of those other industries, but the majority of people, I think they wanted to have them hooked into this kind of matrix. And it just didn't go as planned because there were just enough people who they didn't get that not everyone is a soulless NPC. I think a lot of these high up people make a lot of assumptions about people, and you can see it in Hollywood. This whole idea that like with scripts, they think that people only have a 10.5 second attention span, and they need to change something up and add an action scene every so many seconds in a film. And then I forgot who was talking about it. I want to say it was the composer for Joker, where she mentioned that she and the director challenged that idea that no, people have much longer attention span than that, and all these concepts that they were giving away before in Hollywood just don't exist. They have this very low opinion of people, probably because they themselves don't have any sort of internal world like that. But they just assume that everyone else, just like this article, it's written by like the same type that did that dream thing of, they talked about whatever it was, like Purple Mountains and yeah, the dream experiment thing. It's like, this one's got that same bullshit ass. This is what it sounds like to talk about something I enjoy. It's just all these people that have no idea what it's like to actually enjoy anything in life. And again, just pushing people towards mediocrity.
And cowardice, mediocrity and cowardice. If you look at like social media, like Facebook, I'm astounded by the cowardice of many men today. And you can see that cowardice, like what, say, men 20 years ago would have hid if they felt that way for fear of being called a pussy. They can't wait to tell everyone how frightened they are. And they live in this fearful state. Like I was talking to someone there today, there was an Irish music group that I was on Facebook, like an Irish nostalgia, bands from the past, And it was like, I just mentioned that some band, I think it was Hot House Flowers of the Boomtown Rats. I said, they weren't very good. If you listen to those records now, they're pretty awful, and they don't stand well the test of time. And I didn't even like them back then, but I mean, it doesn't do anything for me. And that'd be as bad as I would say it. You'd hear the comments underneath it would be, "How dare you, moderators? Can we do something about this troll?" Another one would be, "That gave me a lot of satisfaction growing up. You're taking that." These are grown men in their 50s, not raised families and everything. Other ones would be things like, this used to be a safe group, now it's full of hate, only because I critiqued the music of a band that they're into. And I was like, and I'd be like, what, reading these comments appearing? And like then one other guy would say, yeah, I have to agree with Thomas. It really sounds bad now. It was great when I was at 16, but now it sounds terrible. And then underneath that, the trolls are all coming out tonight. Like, they can't even handle you critiquing music bands that they liked without having a nervous breakdown. Now, if they're that bad on regular social media, what will they be like when they enter into that? How will they ever even manage in real life?
Right. Yeah.
I just said they won't, and that's the point.
It's like this thing where, like when people Timoney and my age, like the older millennials, if you want to say that, we're that in between generation of Gen X or whatever it is, and the millennial generation. It's kind of like when we grew up before there was social media. There was at least this thing where like a lot of men tried to copy like the bravado personalities that they saw on TV and film. So you'd get like a lot of guys our age who do like the whole fake tough guy thing. And I mean, that's still a little bit better than what some of the younger millennials and Gen Z are doing, where they don't even try to, thank Xenials, yeah, Stephen, where there's like, there isn't even a good male role model on TV or film nowadays for these guys to look up to. And yeah.
Yeah, it's bullshit. People on YouTube that have these horrible, they're just negative about everything, and they just talk shit, and they have this real condescending tone, and everything they say has like this very strong undertone of disrespect towards everything. It's like, and they're getting so offended and rocked by somebody not doing something that doesn't look satisfying, like they slice the bread wrong or something, and they lose their shit. They absolutely lose their fucking mind over this. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I know what she was just talking about, the not satisfying thing. I didn't know that, like, until here recently, I started looking at some of those videos where people do like the ASMR stuff and like we all get those ads for, the most satisfying thing you'll see, it'll put you to sleep in a few minutes. So it's like, I've looked down a couple of these threads, and there are people that get legitimately uncomfortable if somebody opens up a milk carton the wrong way. And there's like reaction videos that people will do of like watching a video of somebody opening up a milk carton the wrong way and then someone losing their shit over it. And yeah, people going just completely unhinged about this stuff. So it's like, at least back, in the 90s, before any of this came around, there were still tough guys in TV and film for people to emulate a little bit. And that that's going to have its problems anyway. But it's like, I'm sure that's been going on for many generations with people kind of copying TV. Yeah.
You look at all the heroes, the action heroes that are still famous, they're all older than me. Bruce Willis, Die Hard movies, Chuck Norris. They're all fellas who would be old enough to be my uncle or my dad even. And here we are all these years later, and they're the main stars. It really is quite amazing,
Yeah, and now it's like for the most part, every male archetype, like of the main male protagonist, is always this weak little bitch, and it's like he's usually very passive. There's always like a problem between his kids and him, and the relationship. He's always like his wife or his baby mama always has some other man, and he's kind of like bowing down to him a little bit. And there's just like that archetype. No matter what, you see that throughout TV and film everywhere. So it's not like they're even.
Sorry, did you ever see that Peppa Pig thing? It's a cartoon thing, and they're little family of English little cartoon piggies. And you watch that first, and you think, it's kind of sweet and harmless. And then every time the father says or does something, the little girl piggy goes, "Oh, stupid daddy! Daddy is so stupid. Stupid daddy! Look, mommy, daddy's stupid." And it's all about the destruction of the father figure in the eyes of the daughter. It's really fucking sick. Stupid daddy. Yeah.
Talk about creating some fucking daddy issues there, playing off, deep-seated already archetypal daddy issues and just adding a whole new layer. That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, I know Escher used to watch that show. But speaking of Escher, he said something last night that was really fucking blew me away. I was tucking him in and saying goodnight and stuff. And he said this of his own volition. I didn't plant anything. We hadn't talked about anything. And he was like, Mom, sorry, I still have a cough. He was like, he's like, a lot of people at school and like in other places, like they think I'm a real tough guy. And I was like, that's good. I was like, you are a real tough guy, bud. Like, yeah, you're awesome. And he's like, yeah, but he's like, I know I'm pretty tough, but really when I come home, I'm actually really big softy and I just want to love people. And I was like, that's what makes you, huh?
Very deep, that.
Yeah. And I was like, well, that yeah. And I was like, well, that the strongest men are the strongest men that there are the men that still know how to love people, that they can take care of business and they'll do what needs to be done, but they still know how to love their friends and their family. And when they come home, that's, they're at home and they don't have to be the tough guy anymore. And he was just like, oh, that's really great news. Like I can be both. I was like, yes, you can be both. And you are both. And I'm very fucking proud of you for that. So yeah, I was like, came out of my room a little like, whoa, okay, that just happened.
2 pints of lager in the hands of a saint.
7-year-old saint drinking beer.
That's just such an awesome thing, because it's just like for so many years, like what I was talking about with the guys copying like movie stars and stuff, there was so much of that where men had this whole fucking tough outward persona, but they were little bitches on the inside because they only learned what was on the TV. Yeah, didn't know how to love or treat a woman properly. And when it came down to that, all they had was like the hard man facade. And I think that's like, Thomas, you've talked about this in some of your car videos where it's like, there's all these hard men out there who have this hard exterior, but they were the first ones to put the face muzzles on and everything.
Yeah. Wow. That was some education. All right. That was. All the local hard guys down here, the big men down the pub, they were the first ones walking around wrapped up in masks and gloves, walking around the eyeball on the side of the head, terrorized. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's their own fucked up hero complex that they never sorted out when they were kids. They never made that transition. They never made that transition. Including
one that I really thought was a hard man. And I mean, he's a nice guy and everything. I get well with him. But I thought this guy's like 7 foot tall nearly, and he's all muscles. He's one of those Irish fellas, and his hands are like, they're like spades. He can dig the garden like that. These fellas, and he walks around like this, and he's a nice fella and everything. But my God, when the pandemic came, he was like a scared ninny. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it's like once all these people like grow up in the metaverse and Horizon or whatever this is called, I'm real concerned with what will happen to men and what will happen to women too. It's really scary to see what the young Gen Z does and what some of these other kids, like the ones who legitimately lose their shit over the way someone opens a milk carton. I'm concerned about what happens like when their only social interactions or their main social interactions are going to be through these VR bullshits.
Now that's interesting. Just quickly before we go to the next story, you know, what you're just saying about they get irritated by watching someone opening a milk carton on a TV show, right? That normally happens with a couple who are starting to dislike each other. You know, when a relationship is failing, they something like, you know, I always fucking hate the way that you poured your milk into your tea. You know, it comes, well, that sounds to me that these people have a relationship problem with reality. And they're seeing their relation. They're in the same way a couple behaves like that when their marriage is forward, their relationship is falling apart. They're falling apart their relationship with reality. Yeah.
Yep. And like and also like their relationship with the way things are supposed to be. It's like, that's not how you're supposed to open a milk carton. That's not how you're supposed to do it. There's someone who's told us how to do everything, and you're not doing it the way somebody tells us how to. That's what I see is like there's this trend towards like instant obedience towards the way trends say things are supposed to be. And when people go against the way, you know, go against the grain, it's like, you can't do that. You can't do that. Why is he doing that? Just like we talked about the film, or you, Thomas, you had talked about the film War of the Worlds, the one that Tom Cruise played in, and then his daughter. Remember how in that? I mean, this War of the Worlds was from like 2006. So this little girl, I want to say it was Dakota Fanning. Is that the one who plays the little girl? So Dakota Fanning's character, when she's a 10-year-old girl, and throughout the film, she's always like, "Whose car is this? Whose car is this? Why are we doing that?" And it's like that her generation, who's grown up to be in their 20s now, they still have that same kind of Dakota Fanning. Is that Dakota Fanning in Independent or War of the Worlds? That whole archetype of her, the daughter, yeah. But like, why are we doing? Whose car is this? Whose car is this? What are we doing? And it's just like that same fucking personality of like, you're not supposed to do it.
Good film for recognizing archetypes. Whoever wrote that film did a good job. Did you notice like how the most dangerous thing you could have done was to all bond together in the same place? And what did all the NPCs and the sheeples in that film do? They all went on the same road, all went on the same train, all went on the same ferry, where your chance of survival was to be like to lay low among the ruins and just move around at night. I found that really interesting, how their instinct was to bond together and make themselves a target. Yeah,
that scene where they end up at the ferry where the son's where Robbie's driving and Tom Cruise has to like move over and everybody's attacking them. I know it's like, that's one of those things. It's like you always got to have someone looking out to make sure that like that path, they could have turned around the van long before they ended up in the crowd, but it's like, you know, you always got to have someone, you know, the man looking out for the family going, wait a minute, this is a bad path. Let's back up the van and go the fuck in the other direction as fast as we can.
Yeah. I love that film. I love that film.
Yeah.
I think it's great. And it stood the test of time really well. And even the way the Martians come out of the church, at the very first ones coming out of the church, it's almost like a great piece of symbolism for Abrahamism or something.
And I love the like kind of geomancy of that. I know we've talked about on the symposium before that there's like something underground at these sacred sites that people have put layers and layers of civilizations on. We're watching it recently. I'm like, oh man, we should talk to Thomas about this and go, you know, maybe underneath some of these sacred sites, there is some fucking tripod down there. And it's like,
did you see that? Did you see that movie about the priests going to the church in England? I did a review of it on Beyond.
Yeah.
Oh, that really covers that idea. So that film had put the willies right up me when I first saw it, and it still does. That under the church is a pagan temple, but under the pagan temple is this demon the pagans were trying to keep down, but the actual Christians were releasing it by mistake. Whereas black masses were released. What's the name of that bloody film? Someone will type in the thing. But that is a fantastic movie if anyone hasn't seen it. If you want to talk about, want to discuss the whole thing. And I've been to some of those churches in England, and the one that I went to Neil MacDonald, the Dakar one, with the four strange statues of the bear, the four strange statues of these weird animals around it. The first thing I thought was that was under that fucking church. they plugged it under there, these demons.
Yep. Fuck that. Fuck that. I'm going inside. Yeah. Okay. Preparing for the zombie apocalypse. U.S. lab Alcor Life Extension Foundation keeps frozen bodies and heads of 200 people in hope they can be brought back to life. A lab is holding the bodies and heads of 200 people in the hope that they can be brought back to life in the future. The Alcor Life Extension Foundation offers the hope that science and technology will advance to the stage where the deceased can be brought back to life. Alcor will freeze a whole body for around $200,000 or just the head and brain for $80,000 in a process known as cryonics. The company is located in Scottsdale, Arizona, where the bodies will be stored at deep freeze temperatures for decades or even centuries. It was founded by Linda and Fred Chamberlain in 1972 after the couple met at a cryonics conference in the early 1970s. At the time, she was in college and Fred was working as a NASA engineer. Our goals were to start an organization that could save people's lives and give them an opportunity to be restored to health and function, said Linda Chamberlain. If we'd known how hard it was going to be, we might not have tried to do it. But once you get started, something about saving lives, you can't give up. Alcor preserves bodies by slowly lowering their temperature and storing them in giant vessels of liquid nitrogen at negative 196 degrees Celsius. In a typical procedure, the body is packed in ice and frozen before the blood is replaced with a cryoprotectant solution to stop ice crystal formation. Cryonics supporters insist death is a process of deterioration rather than simply the moment when the heart stops. But the industry has long been dismissed as quack science or even fraud. One of the bodies held by Alcor is that of baby Mathurin Neo Varatapong, also known as Eins, who died from brain cancer in 2015, just before her third birthday. Her parents, who are from Thailand, chose to have their late daughter's brain preserved. The girl underwent 10 surgeries, 12 rounds of chemo, and 20 rounds of radiation, but was unable to beat the cancer. Realizing there was no hope of curing his daughter, the father began researching cryonics in the hopes of convincing his wife that it could offer their daughter a new life in the future. This was the way to keep her, and we must keep her, he said in a Netflix documentary, Hope Frozen, A Quest to Live Twice. At first, the whole family was against the idea, but they spent months persuading them. Can we stop the process of dying? Yes. Can you believe that we can stop it? This is what I have to show my family. I spent many months trying to persuade my wife before she finally agreed. The couple began recording videos for their daughter to hopefully see in the future. Meanwhile, a team from Alcor flew to Thailand for when the girl passed away. For cryonics to be as successful as possible, experts say it's best to begin the freezing process within 60 seconds of when the heart stops beating. It meant Eins's family watched on as her body temperature was lowered in front of them before her body was frozen and flown to Arizona. I told her, come back and be my daughter again. Mommy loves you very much. Yep, that's that. Why not just...
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That's a heartbreaking story. I mean, my heart really goes out to that Thai couple. It's the saddest, one of the saddest things I've ever heard.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's just pure grief and heartbreak. But with the other ones who, like, say, the millionaires who have their heads frozen and stuff, consciousness isn't in the body. So they're just, all they're doing is freezing a piece of meat. That's just, even if they reanimated it, they wouldn't be even in there. It would just be a physical form. So unless, I mean, it's also morbid as well. It's like, have you no faith in the afterlife? Have you no faith in your spirit? Have you no faith in anything, you know, to transcend the mortal flesh? And they don't. They just see themselves. I mean, it's just like, you know, the worst kind of atheism. They see themselves as just a biological robot and nothing else.
Right. That whole idea that they think that somehow that person will still be in there. But it's like they don't even comprehend that there is a person in a body, not just a body walking around. But just that idea, like I would imagine if they were somewhere down the line able to reanimate those frozen body parts, that there might be somewhat intact memories on the cells of that body, and something could come in there and be able to access the memories of that person, but it would be like a walk-in type of situation.
Yeah,
not Christopher Walken.
In the Middle Ages, a form of necromancy that you could were sentenced to death for practicing was to put a person's head in a jar of vinegar and white wine, and certain herbs and salts, and then you could bring a demon into that head who would talk to you. So if you wanted to actually see the demon would then look around this world as in that person's head, and you could often talk to them. And it was apparently supposed to. It was one of the things that the Knights Templar were accused of in the Book of Heresies against them, is that they did necromancies of the severed head. And I mean, that when you say the severed head inside a jar, that's the first thing I think.
There's even in the Bible, the story of John the Baptist. I can't remember the queen's name or whatever, but she
Salome
in the story. What was it?
Salome.
Yeah. So if I remember right from Sunday school, it's like they beheaded him or whatever. But the other side of that story was he was beheaded and his head was kept on a golden platter and used for necromancy. She would bring him, or her sorcerer, who I don't know if it was her, but her sorcerer would reanimate, do a ritual and reanimate. And then they would ask, it was basically their oracle. They would ask him questions because he was half living and half dead and could get information for them.
There's no happiness in this story. Ones who are preserving their bodies thinking to come back won't, because the spirit's off somewhere else. Families who had horrible experiences with a child dying of cancer are not going to have their pain healed. It's sort of like a very elaborate version of, when the couple loses a child and they keep the bedroom exactly the same forever. It has that kind of feel to it, doesn't it? But it take it to the nth degree. And then the Picatrix thing, that's going to be the biggest worry, I'd say, in terms of entities.
Yeah, and if you think about it too, even from a different perspective, is the only thing that they're freezing in time and place is themselves, in their own grief and in their own sadness, and their inability to move on and let go. And I don't say that lightly. I can't imagine you losing a child. I don't know how some people survive that. So I don't, I'm not shrinking that part of it at all, but like this metaphor of, freezing them in time and space, it's not effective for the person who's passed away. It's only affecting, in a backwards way, the people who are attempting to make that happen.
There's a church when they took us on a school trip to see the head of Oliver Plunkett. He was a Catholic martyr who had been beheaded in Drogheda, and they had St. Oliver Plunkett's Cathedral there, and his head is inside a glass box. And we were about 8 or 9 or 10, and they said they're going to take us on a day trip to Drogheda, and one of the things we'll see will be Oliver Plunkett's head inside the box, severed head. And I was like, we were all joking there on the way going there to think it was kind of funny. And it nearly made all of us violently ill. The head was in a box staring out, and it looked like it was made of wax, and its eyes are closed. And it's like all these old folks coming up to say prayers under the severed head. And, you get this whole thing like, oh, he was a great hero for the Catholic Church, a great hero for Ireland and stuff. And it's like that was probably one of my wake up moments. I was saying, how could this be good in any way? It's an aberration. Even at that young age, I felt that. And so did all the little kids who grew up in like our little inner city ghetto, all felt the same way. And here's our school teacher telling us what a great man he was. And it was like, the sight of a severed head when you're 9 years old in a box, and it's in a box all covered in jewels. He looks at you like this, and his skin is all like wax. And then you can actually see like the cut here, and then there's a glass box with all jewels all around it. It's just, it seems to me that this is almost like the techno Christ version of what that stuff was in Catholicism. There's also, I think it's St. Andrew's heart, or one of them in Montreal, and the guy's heart is mounted in a little glass bottle in the wall, and you can go see the actual heart of the saint, and it's supposed to be uncorrupted. And then there's the famous one of St. Bernadette's uncorrupted corpse in Lourdes. So it's kind of like what we're seeing here is kind of like a techno spiritual thing. The more I'm thinking about it, it's like the incorruptible flesh of the martyrs or something. of the Techno Martyrs.
It's a great name for a techno duo. They're the Techno Martyrs.
Yeah.
But with that, when you're talking about the vinegar and herbs, I want to say that with the technology of the head in the jar, that might have been a battery that they're making with the electrolysis through the vinegar and some sort of, and that's probably what they were doing there. Is you had to have the right balance there to make a battery. And nowadays, like I would imagine all these fuckers freezing heads and stuff, they could thaw that out and put the right current in there the right way. And yeah,
well played, Jason. I never even thought of that one. And don't forget all the electrical connections inside the brain.
Yep.
You've got yourself a little radio receiver.
Right. And
with a speaker and a microphones.
Yeah, the larynx is still there because if they do the cut right. Didn't they also keep Ed Kelly's head, I want to say? Did John D do that, or is that a rumor? If anybody knows in the chat.
I never heard that one. I think that Kelly was just dumped in a hole somewhere.
Okay.
But Walt Disney was the first one, I think, to have his heads put into cryogenics. So I remember that was a big deal when I was a kid, that even when I was a little kid, we were told that, Walt Disney's head is in a jar in Disneyland. And it really is. It's frozen. It's in same system, the nitro, liquid nitrogen. Yeah.
Fucking creepy. I wonder if is it what Club 33 that's there at Disneyland in Anaheim? Is that what's in Club 33? Is Walt Disney's head? Man,
yeah.
It makes me wonder. Yeah, some of these scripts that Disney studios are still making, I wonder if they're getting them from necromancy of some sort.
Well, he was a crazy transhumanist. He was big time transhumanist Freemason.
Really, didn't know that. Huh.
He like someone like him would be much more weird than say Hubbard, and yet the world is going to hate Hubbard. The kind of thing. Right. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those names you're not allowed to say, like Hitler, Crowley, Hubbard. Yeah. But no, that whole thing about Disney, that would be an interesting short film to make about his weirdness. I didn't know that he was a Freemason.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, big time.
I knew he was a pagan. I didn't know that. Yeah,
he was pagan.
That's what I've heard before, right?
Walt Disney, I never heard that one.
I thought it was you I heard that from. I don't know. No, it wasn't you. Now that I remember. Yeah, but anyway, that'd be cool to look into Walt Disney a little bit and see if there's any other connections there. But yeah, I'm diverging.
He was a creative genius. He got something from somewhere. But
have you ever seen their early cartoons that are really creepy, like dogs and puppies being processed into food by machines and stuff? It's like there was a guy called.
Sorry, go ahead.
There was a guy called Lennon Honor. He was a chap in America who made very good videos about 10 years ago, critiquing these early Disney films, and the stuff that he dug up, you'll be like, what? And like animals having their flesh stripped off by machines, and then the flesh cooked and put into jars. And this would be like their cartoons. This would be like early Disney cartoons.
Well, so I'm trying to remember now. I'm going to have to dig this up and refresh my memory, but there was some brilliant research done by the late Tracy Twyman, the winter before she died. She did this amazing expose on, I don't know if you know who Mac the Knife is, but he was a serial killer, I want to say in the 1800s sometime. And I'll look up this video and I'll share it too. Mickey Mouse was actually totally based off Mac the Knife, the way that he's dressed, his mannerisms. And then there's one particular video where it's like, I want to say it's Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. And who's the big guy? Bruno, the big, whoever the guy that's always trying to hit on Minnie Mouse. Anyways, I'll find it. There's so much in there and I can't remember any of it right now, but Brutus. Yeah. I'll find, but that was like when I came across her research concerning all of that stuff, I was fucking floored.
Wow.
And this video is so creepy. And then you can't help but you can't unsee that after it. So I'll look that up and I'll share it because it blew my mind.
Yeah, I want to see that.
Mac the Knife is the inspiration for Mickey Mouse.
So many creepy. And if you even look at like how they re-engineered fairy tales. If you look at the original fairy tales as the Europeans told them,
they're terrifying.
They made movies of. They were all about to teach children about the dangers of the world. Like Little Red Riding Hood is about being raped when you're on your period. Hansel and Gretel is about pedophilia. And these were all important life lessons that was told in the forms of allegory. Bruno Bettelheim has a fantastic book from the 1970s called The Uses of Enchantment, all about it. But Disney took all that stuff that was very powerful lessons in life and made them all fluff. And that's probably where we get, that's, yeah, and instead of children getting a lesson about the dangers of life, they're made soft. It's like the difference between how people in Celtic country saw the fairies and Tinkerbell.
Yeah, now they're Tinkerbell. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Very interesting stuff there. Okay. Watch. Did we get the video for this? Or just going to link that later? Okay. There is a video connected to this, so go and watch the video later. Okay. Got the screenshot. Was there a flying dragon filmed in China? An intriguing video from China purportedly shows a mysterious flying creature that some think may be a dragon. Very little is known about the 5-minute-long piece of footage, aside from claims that it was filmed in a mountainous area of China near the Laotian border. In the clip, an anomalous animal appears to be majestically sailing through the mountains as it flaps its enormous wings. The breathtaking nature of the footage and the fantastic possibilities it suggests have led the video to amass over 200,000 views on YouTube in a handful of days. Paranormal enthusiasts theorize that the creature in question could be a dragon or a pterodactyl. Skeptics, however, argue that it is probably a CGI hoax, while others have even proposed that the anomaly is actually a drone, although that seems less plausible than the dragon hypothesis. Check out the remarkable video and let us know on the Coast to Coast Facebook page. Jason has some really interesting things to say about this, so I'm going to let him do that.
So the first thing I thought of after seeing this, or actually after hearing, I looked at the video and it's whatever, but regardless of what that is or what it isn't, it's kind of reminds me of, Thomas, what you talked about with the wolves returning, that if the Chinese people or the people of the Far East have had a lot of their spirituality stripped away from them by Maoism, by communism, by just whatever it is that's come into their culture, that potentially this could be the return of some of their mythology, some of their own paganism coming back. I don't care what that was or what it wasn't. I think that this is synchronistic, especially as we're nearing the Lunar New Year. And tomorrow, I think. Yeah. And that this story's mainstreaming it right now, coming up into the Chinese New Year, that I want to say this is like the return of the wolves. This is the return of the dragon to China. And if this is what helps take down the CCP from the inside out, this just idea that there will always be more Chinese people than there are people part of the Chinese Communist Party. And something has come along to inspire something within the Chinese soul, I want to say. And if that's what it takes, if there's just a seed of their original culture that turns into something beautiful and robust, that will be what brings down the CCP, so that the Chinese people can be their own people again. So that this, if we want to call it, if communism, I don't think communism is something created by humans, whether it's created by demons or entities or something non-human. I'm certain communism is not something that came organically onto this planet. There's nothing that mirrors communism anywhere within nature. Their tribalism, Abrahamic religions is the nearest. Right. And that's not human. It's not natural, and it's not part of the evolutionary line of this planet. You can look at things and just see the way things evolve, and you can see social and societal constructs that are representative on a microcosm or within a macrocosm within nature. And you can see, okay, yeah, there's a correspondence here, and it's evolved. It's slightly different. But yeah, Abrahamism and communism, I don't see very much difference between the two. Actually, it's just a slightly different flavor of the same essence. But if there's the seed of the return of the dragon within China, I think that's fucking awesome for them, the Chinese people and the people of the Far East. They have a beautiful pagan tradition of their own, and I would love for them to be able to have that back again. I mean, I'm not trying to be, just to claim that I'm any kind of expert on their culture. But I think that they have a rich culture of their own that they deserve to have back, that they can get out of. Some of those nations have Christianity and so much other practices that don't have anything to do with their spiritual legacy. Like that if they're, yeah, right.
Buddhism's called Buddhism,
right? Yeah. It's basically Abrahamic, right? Yeah.
No, it's Catholicism of the Middle East or the Far East.
Yeah, right.
It's even got the same problems with like sexual abuse of young boys and everything on a massive scale. Yeah,
that's right. So it's like return to something that existed eons ago. Just like it would be awesome to see Shinto, I want to say is what it is in Japan, return. It would just be really beautiful for these people to have their own spiritual legacy return of them. So whatever that dragon was, I know, Carl, you said that wasn't even a Chinese dragon. That might or might not be true, but whatever it was, I think this is.
I was going to say that too. A Chinese dragon looks more like a snake. It's a different thing, but it's also a allegorical thing, less than a kind of I haven't seen the video. It looks more like a Lovecraftian beastie or something like that. Now, assuming it's not, just people have to remember, there's lots of ways to look at this stuff. Even if that's a CGI fake, it can still be important as to why this person made the CGI fake at this particular time. And you could just say, well, I just did it for a laugh. And then you say, but why now? Did you realize you did it on a full moon when you released it? No, I didn't know that. And you see, this is another thing. A lot of the stuff that they say has been debunked hasn't actually been debunked. And even the stuff that's been created, deliberate fakes like Slender Man, have actually taken on the aspects of an actual real entity. Then the other one was a famous one, was the Shadow, was a cartoon character. And this is, we're in the world of chaos magic here now. So even when it's faked, it could still, I'm not saying it always does, I'm saying it can have incredibly profound meaning. You see, because we'd have to understand what underlying forces drove the faker to fake it at that time. Because
right. And it's like to us in our cultures, the dragons we don't have a whole bunch of mythology and stuff within our cultures concerning dragons. So, but as a Chinese person or someone who lives over there, whether or not they even think it's real, it doesn't fucking matter. There's something archetypal that it triggers within them when they see that. So it's the two things working together, right? It's the guy or whoever did the thing, whatever his conscious motivations were, it doesn't really matter. It happened. It's a thing now that exists.
Yeah.
And then all of those millions and millions of people who see the video, maybe they didn't see it in the sky, I don't know, but that it's triggering something on a subconscious level for all of those people, which at that point, it's very real.
Yeah. Within the Western mystical tradition, the dragon represents two things: the hoarding of wealth that's of no use to you. So it's very much in the concept of the Kabbalistic 666 thing, not the creation of wealth, but the hoarding of wealth, and also the Virgin. It's always heavily associated with not the Virgin Mary, but with virgins and the protection of the Virgin. And so I don't know what the symbolism of that would be. But I mean, this is the whole thing. It's like when something comes up and they say, oh, it's a fake. Okay, it's a fake. Why? Why and who and when and what's behind the scenes cause people? The classic one, that's the Cottingley fairies, right? The two girls in England about 100 years ago, maybe 120 years ago now, had photographs taken of them with fairies in their backyard. And these became a sensation at the time. And they're very sort of classic English fey-looking fairies. And they was considered, it was the biggest thing going. And none other than Arthur Conan Doyle totally believed that the girls were seeing and communicating with the fairies in their back garden in Cottingley in England. It then turned out later that they said that they were so frustrated trying to photograph the fairies that they ended up creating cardboard little paper models, like papier-mâché models, and photographing them and telling people that was the fairies when they weren't. But they said they only did that was because they could not get the fairies to actually appear on photograph. And they were so frustrated. But on their deathbed, the last one who died said, yes, one of those photographs is a picture of a real fairy. And she identified which one. One did come out. Now, again, if they hadn't faked, if the Cottingley sisters hadn't faked the fairy paintings, the fairy photographs, it wouldn't have created a sudden revival in fairy folklore in England, which it did big time, okay? So the fairies operated through the sisters, and the fairies even got them to make the fake pictures, right? And they were actually seeing fairies. According to one of them on our deathbed, you said, yeah, one of them was real in those pictures. And that goes to show you that even though they were faked, whatever kind of force from the other side was working through those girls made them fake them, because it actually raised fairy consciousness for whatever reason. Maybe they harvest energy from it. I don't know. Maybe within the other realms, they needed an injection of consciousness, because in the Celtic lore, if you don't talk about the fairies because you bring them in manifestation. So if everyone is talking about the fairies, they're being brought into manifestation. And this is around the same time the spiritualist movement was going on. Very interesting stuff. So even when it's faked, you have to ask yourself why and when and how and for what reason. Because there's even a deep story there.
Agreed. And it's just, if someone faked this, it could also have been one of those things where somebody has been seeing dragons. There's been a group of people seeing dragons and didn't catch it on film. So they hired someone like, hey, we need someone to CGI the shit out of this. And, there's a thing too, if it's not a Chinese dragon, Chinese people would look at that, go, no, that's not what a Chinese dragon looks like. It looks more like a serpent. And then you get people thinking about Chinese dragons, right? If you make something that doesn't look quite right, you're going to get people dubbing in the part that is right. So I think it's a beautiful thing. I saw this and I'm like, oh yeah, this is just what's needed right now.
And one more flavor I would like to throw into the mix. We know that these entities appear as UFOs. Why wouldn't they appear as dragons? In fact, look at that image there. It has a kind of a Lovecraftian kind of beastie vibe to it. So we know they appear as monsters. They appear as demons. They appear as ghosts. UFOs, why wouldn't they appear as dragons? So there's numerous possibilities there.
They show up in the form that needs to be seen in their time.
Yeah. Like there's lots of paranormal stories where there was a place that wasn't haunted, had no history of being haunted, and people went into them and started having seances, and suddenly the places became haunted. So you can actually make, through the actual paranormal Fortean acts, bring things into manifestation. You can do that. Lovecraft is the ultimate example of that. But you can do that. That if you pour enough concentration into something, you will actually do anything. You can bring anything into the material realm in a kind of an elemental form from the other side. So I think I want to see that video. I haven't seen it, but I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, and maybe the person who made it, maybe they made it on purpose.
Or maybe it's a real dragon. Maybe, or maybe it's someone. I met a chap in England, and he went through all the different possibilities of what a dolmen is, and he finished by saying, maybe none of them are wrong.
Right.
And I think that's the spirit of being a Fortean. Maybe none of them are wrong.
You have to look at it through the lens of like a kaleidoscope, and the shapes fractal out, and there's a million possibilities, and then you turn it a little bit more, and it collapses back into something else, and then they're all versions of what's real. All right, Thomas, it is the time. Are you ready? Take us away.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
Well, welcome to this week's Psychic Weather, and we have a very good one this week. This week's Psychic Weather seems to be apparently joy. There seems to be a lot of happiness, joy, and contentment out there. And a lot of this has to do because we're coming to the end of the scamdemic of the last 2 years, but it's not exclusively that. There's almost like an element of refreshment of the human spirit happening as a whole. If you look at what's happening in Canada and you have that convoy going towards Ottawa, every last one of those people is not angry. They all have a smile on their face. There's a sense of like being alive. And that's what the psychic weather is at the moment. People are on the word of vitality, the living life of people is starting to come and show in many different ways at the moment. And it's an actual good time to be around. This is why we were attacked by the Renfields in the previous weeks leading up to this, because the Renfields are always aware they're like radar. They know when some good positive stuff is coming in for humans as well. So they go for a quick smash and grab feed. So the psychic weather, and you look around social media, I'm looking at all my control specimens, and they're the ones that were flared up, the pathological ones have gone dormant, and everyone else seems to be pretty relaxed, easygoing, and happy. So it's a very brief and short psychic weather this week, but it is the joy of life, and la dolce vita, and We're discovering, many people around the world are discovering the sheer joy in just being a person and just being themselves. And that's the week in psychic weather this week. Nothing heavy, quite nice, quite refreshing. Just like the real weather, you'll have good weather and you'll have bad weather. And right now we have real good weather.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
Mic drop on that. Thank you so much, Thomas. Yeah, that was just what we all needed to hear. I think, it's January. It's kind of always like the shittiest month of the year, and you coming down from the holidays. And I don't know how it is where everybody else lives, but here it just is soul crushing. There's no dynamic weather. It's just gray and overcast, and it's fucking depressing. But yeah, so a little bit of sunshine with the psychic weather do us all some good.
And it's just, make it through these next couple of months, February through August, so we can get back into the spooky season again.
Exactly. I live only for October. I'm alive 1 month out of the year. Nah, I'm just joking. Okay. Newly found colossal statues portray ancient Egyptian kings as a sphinx. The ancient Egyptians were one of the most advanced civilizations in history, and we continue to uncover the many treasures they left behind. Recently, archaeologists discovered 2 incredible likenesses of King Amenhotep III. The king was memorialized in the form of a sphinx. These ancient Egyptian statues are literally larger than life. In the news we first saw on Design Taxi, we learned that these statues were excavated as part of an archaeological initiative. The Colossi of Memnon and Amenhotep III Temple Conservation Project began in 1998. 24 years later, today, it continues its mission. The conservation project aims to restore, rebuild, and preserve the temples, a worthy investment into such a rich historical site. The aim of the Colossal Memnon... sorry, my phone jumped. Okay, and these statues are the latest piece of that puzzle. King Amenhotep III ruled in the 18th dynasty. He was the grandfather of King Tutankhamun, and these giant statues memorialized him. A release from Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities shares that the Sphinx statues measure 8 meters in length. It equals out to 26 feet, many times larger than any human being. Yep, hold on. Sorry. Okay. The gate of the third pylon, indicating that all the pieces of these 2 statues have undergone careful cleaning, strengthening, and restoration, which showed the presence of an inscription in the chest area bearing the royal name of Amenhotep III, which is the beloved of the god Amun-Ra. Truly a beautiful find. In addition, the researchers unearthed ancient Egyptian statues of the goddess Sekhmet, as well as other remains of columns with celebratory and ritual markings. They will restore these and settle them in their original places. We hope that one day soon we can all see these ancient wonders in their full glory. Yep.
There's something about that Egyptian art that has a remarkable effect on you, on your emotions. I've never been to Egypt, but I've been to enough museums to come face to face to these statues, and you're just so struck by how a different level of consciousness creates them. They're a different type of human being than what we are today creates them. And through the eons, they have this power about them. It's hard to even put your finger on it. Even the friezes with the hieroglyphics on it, there's something about them. Nothing from that world is average or ordinary. Everything is remarkable. I mean, the quality of the artwork and the execution is staggering. The way they had tremendous understanding of form and shape and negative spaces and geometric design. It's just spectacular, and it's never been surpassed, I don't think.
And I just imagine, when these things are being carved out or whatever they did, there has to be, in my mind, there has to be, I don't know. In my mind, there's like 20, 30, 40, and maybe even more. I don't know if they were priest class people or if everybody in the culture really kind of was tapped into this stuff, but they were probably singing or toning or chanting or something while these things are being created. And so, yeah, just like what you're saying, the actual construction of them is mind boggling and just amazingly beautiful. But there's something else that's embedded in it when you look at it, that it's almost like a memory.
Yeah, like this, I think it's the Keats poem, Ozymandias. That's like really, really brings home when he meets Ozymandias is the Greek name for the pharaoh Ramesses, and he encounters the statue of Ozymandias and Ramesses, and the poem really is tremendous. It's like really brings home, you're not only facing the statue of a king, but you're facing the statue of a god. He talks about Ozymandias, the statue, as if it's still alive. There's a force inside there, and it's just okay. Even though you had the pharaonic Egypt stuff that carved the head of a lion on top of the Sphinx, the Sphinx didn't originally have that head. It's too small, and there was probably a real lion's head or some other kind of creature on it. And the water erosion shows it's much older than they say they were. But even the pharaonic Egypts for Egyptians were phenomenal artists and scientists and engineers too in their own right. You had the pre-pharaonic ones who made the Great Pyramids and made the Sphinx, and then you had the pharaonic ones who made, a lot of the things like the Temple of Karnak and stuff like that. But even they were tremendous. It was almost like they were carrying a school along with them from those times. But you get the impression, I remember years ago watching a documentary about my old man when I was a kid about Egypt. And he says, God, those people were he says, wow, those people were terribly religious, weren't they? Now, that's a very powerful statement, because if you read any book, any textbook on philosophy, they will say to you that ancient societies were not advanced because they put religion to the fore rather than science. And yeah, we have the Mayans, whoever built those things, the Toltecs, we have the Egyptians, we have the ancient Greeks, and these are societies. The Romans were saturated, the Babylonians, Mesopotamians, saturated in religion. There was nothing more to it. And yet they invented most of the stuff of engineering that we still use today. So right off the bat, I have a book on philosophy, and that's what it says on the first page, that ancient societies were not technically advanced because they were very religious. And the exact opposite is true, that whatever religion they had, well, we know what they had, but whatever sense of that spiritual feeling inside them is definitely transferred into their artworks, and it remains. I saw that at the Hindu temples in Sri Lanka. Even with a small statue of Shiva, you feel Shiva in that thing. And I see that even with like really good religious statues in Catholicism, like the Pieta in Rome by Michelangelo, or Michelangelo's David. People are awed by that, not only by the execution and the artistry of Michelangelo, but also they look into David's eyes and they see a young boy in there on the cusp of manhood. So the Egyptians knew more than anyone that you could put a soul inside a piece of artwork.
What's the quote? We place no emphasis on virgin or pigeon. Our method is science. Our aim is religion. I don't know. I can't quote it exactly, but that Crowley quote. And I think what's really beautiful about this, again, too, that's similar to what we were just talking about with the dragons, is that there's a return of something that's coming back that the mainstream academia has been trying to cover up for so long. There was the row of sphinxes that was put out. I want to say Law and Milo Duquette shared that a little while back, and that was maybe in November, December timeframe when they found all those sphinxes that are on display now. And it's like there are Egyptian artifacts and Egyptian works of art like this that have been deliberately scrubbed out of history, and there's something new coming up. Because it's like, here in the United States, we learned that the people who made the pyramids were these little simple people who wore loincloths and used chisels and stuff, and were, it was done, mud and hay, and it was done by slave labor. And it's like, I don't know if anybody's ever used anything that's made by slave labor before, made by like prisoners. That shit has that energy in it, and it falls apart. It doesn't work. In the military, we use skillcraft. They use skillcraft stuff, and skillcraft is made by a bunch of prisoners, and like if you use a skillcraft pen, it works maybe 10% of the time, and the lines on the paper aren't quite right when you use the paper made by skillcraft, and things just never work when they're made by people who aren't appreciated. So if the pyramids were made by slaves, those fuckers would have fallen over eons ago, and there'd be nothing but maybe a little mound of dirt left that's slightly raised up, and it'd be a sand dune. But those were not made by slaves; those were made by gods in human form. Like you're talking about the pharaohs. Yeah.
Why do you think why do you think the Cleopatra needles that have been taken to London, the Vatican, and I think there's Paris and there's a few others around the world? Because there's a power in those things. And these imperial structures need that power. And even anyone who sort of like even touched like you look at the Ptolemies. The Ptolemies went from Greece, Macedonia, to Egypt and became the pharaohs. But they were not ethnically Egyptians, they were ethnically Greek. And Cleopatra, Ptolemy, they eventually led to the line of Alexander the Great. Look what Alexander the Great achieved by the time he was a young man in his early 20s. He conquered the known world. He had written books about the places like Sri Lanka, which might have been Jupiter or Neptune back in those days, and led a new form of army that conquered the world. And he had the power of the pharaonic Egyptians inside him, even though he wasn't one of them. Just the fact that his family had assumed the throne of that world had passed that amazing power on through the Ptolemaic line, through Cleopatra and the rest of them.
And it's with that, like Thomas, you're talking about the pharaohs being living gods. It's like that idea of being able to become a living god in human form. It's possible. It might take several incarnations to get to that point. But, there are spiritual philosophers in the West who came about in the 20th century, who came about with ideas of how to bring somebody up to that level, how to take someone and raise their level of awareness to be a god in human form. There's man, the animal, there's the flesh and blood, human body that we have that has its own mind of its own. And I think, a lot of what we would consider normies or NPCs are mostly a being that has a low level of awareness that is sometimes there, but for the most part, you're just talking to the mind that runs the body. The same mind that runs a dog, or the same mind that runs a cat or a chicken or a horse, the mind that takes care of the body. But then, there's something beyond the mind, the soul, the being that, you, me, Timoney, all of us, everybody watching the show, that person behind the eyes, using the senses, and that is the god or goddess within human form. And I think the pharaohs and, Alexander the Great, or anybody else who's used this technology, Aleister Crowley, whomever, knew how to harness to the fullest extent the god within human form. So, they weren't religious in an Abrahamic sense, or they weren't religious in like a backward sense, the way that religion has become in current times with Abrahamism and New Age and all that bullshit. No, it was religious in a sense that they understood that the spiritual being within human form is a divine thing. And I sometimes wonder if that's where monotheism came from, that it wasn't about a single god up in the sky or something, but it was about that was more of an allegory of the being in charge of the body. Like if, the winged sun disk, if that's a symbol in Egyptian mythology, that has more to do with the human soul taking flight, so to speak, that you as a divine being, putting your wings on, so to speak, being able to take flight, being able to take total control and be a being operating a body, not a body going around operating and making impressions upon the being, but actually being the person in that body, driving that body fully. And that's, how one becomes a god in human form. And I think there's a lot of that in the Hermetic tradition that made its way over into, the Golden Dawn and into Thelema and into other groups that came after Thelema. And I think that stuff is still there, and it's terribly suppressed. And if you even utter the names of some of those people, you become ridiculed. But there is a continuum of that information being taught. And I think that it goes back to Egypt and before, and Babylon, and everything you're talking about, Thomas, that it has nothing to do with Abrahamism. It has nothing to do with monotheism in that sense. But I think the idea of monotheism comes from that concept that you, me, all of us, we are all divine beings in human form. And the concept of there being one God is like, yeah, the one that you see in the mirror behind your eyes.
Yeah. I think the the pre-pharaonic Egyptian culture that built the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid was probably Atlantis or an Atlantean type culture. There definitely was in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Spain and Portugal and Atlantis, just like Plato described it, identical. It did exist. It had to exist. And the ancient megalithic sites of Europe are what's left of it. They were like outposts of an empire, and that's what's left of them. And I'm convinced of it. Like the more I look at this stuff, you look at things like, I mean, outside Egypt, but like Malta, I mean, these things are incredible for the age. Even things like Skara Brae and Orkney in the north of Scotland. I mean, a building, if you walked into it today, a modern person would recognize it. It even has flushing toilets, and it's at least 6,000 years old. We're from a time when we're told that monkeys lived there, monkey men lived there. And, then they found these orbs, these strange balls that are incredibly intricately designed. It obviously been machined like the Egyptian stuff. So I think like a lot of the fantastical stuff in Egypt that's obviously pre-pharaonic goes to that Atlantean culture. I'm more and more convinced of it. That's why that story stays with people. And, it's never left human consciousness. There was a world before the world, and it was a world of magic and a world of a different kind of technology. And that different kind of technology is what built the pyramids, and it's gone now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us were there, and now a lot of us have come back.
I think when you first hear those, when I was given the analogy there the other day, like you can have a third or fourth generation Irish American, Italian American, Greek American, Polish American, and they have a longing to go back to the country they know nothing about. They have this feeling.
I can say for me, for sure, being Irish American.
It's very common. It's very common. Now, collectively, do all of us have that for Atlantis? I think we do.
Yeah.
I think and it's in our genes. And I think one of the reasons we have an obsession with catastrophism is that we actually have a racial memory of the deluge that took the thing that destroyed Atlantis.
Yeah, when I was stationed in South Carolina, I felt such a strong Atlantean energy in South Carolina. My God, like I don't know if it was just if you consider Atlantis being like a global civilization, the way that some people describe it, I felt such a strong, like that's when I switched on, was when I was in Columbia, South Carolina. There's just a tremendous,
and all these megaliths are finding in New England and now finding more south and south. They're heading towards the Carolinas. They're going to find megaliths down there eventually too. They're buried in the woods. They're there, like the ones they found loads in New York State and Maine and New Hampshire, and they're finding more in New Jersey now. They will find them down there.
It's buried under the sandhills. Yeah,
Atlantis is down there and it's, Plato. This is one of the things in recent years that annoys me is there's some ridiculous stories of like Atlantis is in the Pacific, or it's this lava plain in Mauritania in northern Africa, which is a natural formation. Plato was and the Egyptians were very specific. It was just past the Straits of Gibraltar. They never said it was anywhere else. It was there and nowhere else. And that's where it was. And that makes it ideal for having to have this pan-Atlantic culture where you could have people, I often think of like the Camino in northern Spain where they walk to the ocean. Was that a leftover of a pilgrimage that walked all the way to America across Atlantis? And that's how, you have this mid-Atlantic continent or gigantic empire landmass. Suddenly the Atlantic is a lot smaller because you only have to go short distances on either side to bridge Europe. This explains so much like things that little statues of elephants have been found in Central America that shouldn't be there. Things like Ogham script, the ancient Irish Ogham script being found in New England. And Dennis Trojan, what did the Templars really know? What did Christopher Columbus really was looking for? It's when you start really thinking about the Atlantis thing, boy, does it open a kettle of worms.
Oh yeah, and were there Egyptian artifacts found in the Mississippi River Valley? Were there stelae? Yeah, in the Southwest too. And I'd heard, I think it was Cliff High was talking about it a few years ago about the stelae that were there at fucking banks of the Mississippi River, and at the Smithsonian, I'm pretty sure, have them. But yeah, I mean, there's fictional books about
Oak Island in Canada. That's another one, and that's another kettle of fish. You remember, like, it was only 60 years ago that they didn't even believe the Vikings got to Canada. Yeah. You know, they didn't even believe that. Now that's been total. Now, how did the Vikings know there was a land over there? You know, they had to store. It was Ragnarok, the sinking of Ragnarok, part of the Atlantean destruction, like the Doggerland went down and the plane of Digrid rose up. You know, it's just the more a life of me looking into like megaliths and ancient mysteries and Fortean stuff. I'm starting to see this kind of like this haze, this dissolving, and behind it is the word Atlantis. You know,
it's like that piece of artwork that's always being shared, Thomas. The one that's like it shows a high civilization, and then the stone structures, and then they're weathered and weathered.
Such a powerful graphic. Yeah. That you know that, like, you know, you look at Stonehenge now and it's all rough and wobbly, but they don't really know how old it is. They don't. You know, those graves could have been buried there when the thing was already old. You know, and those stones were actually perfectly straight at one time and were now weathered. You know,
right?
I mean, I've seen. All you have to do is go to a graveyard, and especially in this part of the world where it rains a lot. Graves from the 1890s, you can barely read the writing on them now. They're just like pieces of stone and the writing's gone, been washed off in the rain. Now multiply that by 15,000 years. And you look at the Sphinx, look at what the erosion has done to that in no time.
Right. Almost as if it was under the ocean. I know people hate it when I say that, but I want to say the Sphinx was underwater at one point. And
that's not right about it. I found that I'm working on a project, an Atlantis project at the moment, and I found in the British Library a map that shows that when Atlantis existed, the Sahara was underwater. See, Jason, you might be on the ball there. When Atlantis sunk, you think to yourself, well, what, you know, that's already in the water. You have a tectonic displacement, crustal displacement. So this fella goes down and it pushes this one up. So Africa comes out from under the sea as Atlantis goes down. It's almost like, say, there's the there's African plate, right? Here's the Atlantis one on top of it. That goes down and creates crustal displacement pushes Africa up. And there was a very common theory in the 1700s that, and I found a map in the British Library that actually shows Africa, as the guy had theorized, underwater while Atlantis was above water. And this is before they really knew about glacial and crustal displacement. This guy had worked it out similar to you by saying there's lots of things in the Sahara that suggest that was the bottom of the sea, and not too long ago.
Right. So it's like that stuff is old. Yeah.
Yeah.
250,000 years or more is what Timoney's saying. And it seems like more of this is just coming to the surface now, to use that term. It's like for so long, whether it's the Smithsonian or academia, whomever it is, suppressing this information, it's like those illusions are it's a fog that's being lifted, and we're seeing something much older. And there's something that we can connect to spiritually about this. I don't want to sound new agey about it, but it's like, it's just that step switches you on.
Well, I think like the whole thing now with the jab, the needlecraft, and the DNA thing, that suddenly made lots of us who never thought about protecting our DNA suddenly look, hold on a second, I may be having the DNA of Atlantis inside me. I'm not giving it to Pfizer. You know, that triggers something in a lot of us, you know. And dates, like I was always hung up on the dates, like, okay, what's 10,000 years? Was it 6,000? And then I thought, well, it doesn't matter what the date was. It was there. It was there in ancient times. It could have been 8,000 years ago, and it could be 80 or 800,000 years ago. I stopped caring about the time. I started caring about the legacy. And suddenly, you know, you'll always have to say, like, what date did it appear? The thing was that you have to understand that when antiquarians first started off, it was being run by Freemasons and Presbyterians following. Are you gone?
Can you see us?
Okay. I can see you now. Was I still talking? Could you hear me? Yeah.
Keep going. Yeah.
I heard that weird noise too. But when antiquarians started in the 1700s, in the early 1700s, they were strictly adhering to the Reverend James Ussher's timeline that the Earth was only 6,000 years old and began on a certain Tuesday in February or whatever. And that was they all went to very religious colleges like Mary Magdalene in the fundamental Free Presbyterians and stuff like that. And that's why no one wanted to say anything was older than the age of the Bible. And it wasn't really until Göbekli Tepe a decade or so ago that they really started to say, okay, we throw the towel, then it's older than the Bible. So we're living with the Reverend James Ussher's legacy, you know, and to my shame, he was an Irishman, but you know, a legacy of dating the world to 6,000 years. But that has damaged archaeology and antiquarian studies no end. How could it be older than the Bible? This is literally how even the atheist ones think. You know, this is they've all been programmed to fix as a certain date, and that's it. And it's 6,000, and nothing was built before that. But we now know Göbekli Tepe, that's now bollocks. It's been proven that's not true at all.
Right. And just this whole idea of using the Bible as a time scale, you know, AD and BC, that there's this demarcation point, and there's just these people who are the time scale keepers who go throughout time. They go throughout history and pinpoint them to a certain time, and then probably create fabricated bits of time in there and attribute things to maybe people that didn't even exist, or they make an amalgamation of people together of characters together into one person. And it was just, yeah.
I even have a theory that the British Israelite movement, this whole concept that the people of this part of the world in particular came from the Holy Land, the 12 lost tribes, that was really invented around the time the Atlantis thing was starting to take off. And I often wonder if that was a psyop to kill off the Atlantis consciousness that was rising around the time of Edgar Cayce and Ignatius Donnelly.
And that reminds me, I've heard people talk about John Dee and Ed Kelly when they were bringing about, when they were first doing their scrying processes, and that somebody says that they were trying to bring about the Book of Revelations, somehow this Abrahamic thing. And I want to say there's a lot of I don't know if that's true or if that's, again, misinformation to try to turn Enochian, if you want to call it, you know, magic into something Abrahamic. So I've heard enough people talk about that, and I'm like, that doesn't seem right to me. I mean, I know they're using that name Enoch for the script, but I don't think or for the language, but I don't think John Dee and Ed Kelly called it Enochian, right? They didn't call it.
No. Look. Anything can be used as a structural framework. And the Book of Revelations is a fantastic grimoire when you start thinking about it. And if you want to actually do, you know, as a really big time, the more I think about it, it's a really powerful magical act. And I often wonder if that was St. John's vision really about that. But it really comes across as something very, you know, the empire collapses, the beast that Babylon rides on the back of the seven-headed beast and all this stuff. This is all pure, like, magical stuff, you know? And so, I mean, when you look at what the Christian Bible is, it's the Torah, right? And that's the Jewish first five books of the Torah. The Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And that's written, the earliest one of them was written 100 years after the alleged death of Jesus. So none of them actually knew Jesus. They're all going by stories. And then the Book of Revelations, St. John's letter. And you read, this thing is at the end of the Bible. And it's like, the reason why that has left such a powerful impact on people is because the magical grimoire. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And you could actually do a rite and a ritual, a ceremony, using that book as a kind of a psychic catastrophism thing, you know, to resurrect yourself in many ways. And so that may be what Dee and Kelly were looking at it for. But Enochian was a language, okay, there's some theories out there. Colin Wilson, in his quote-unquote spoof, The Book of Dead Names, claims that it actually, a computer software program found that it actually did exist somewhere in, like, you know, Armenia. But, you know, it definitely is Arabic in its vibe, in its sensation. I think it's probably the language of the jinn, to be honest with you.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Language of the jinn. Yeah. Fuck. Yeah. Do you speak Enochian at all, Thomas? I haven't picked it up at all yet.
No, well, it does. First of all, it doesn't really interest me. It's other than it's interesting, but I wouldn't have any interest in an application of it, mainly because, well, look what happened to Kelly and Dee. I mean, they were just, look what Mandini did to them, lied to them and terribly, and they all blame Kelly. But even Crowley said the old man Dee was too trusting of the voices, the spirits they were calling them. And they said she was, the way they describe her, she was a flirtatious, exotic woman. She sounds like a belly dancer from Arabia or something, you know, something like from the 101 Arabian Nights. And
real similar to Sarah Northrup with Hubbard and Parsons.
Yeah, and also Babylon, as you know, and also the way they led them to, like, it just destroyed their life in both their ways. Like John Dee's legacy, although he's very famous and respected, but it kind of wrecked his legacy getting involved in that stuff, because he sounds tremendously naive, because Kelly was so good at bringing forward the messages. It's like the same mistake people make reading the Ouija board. They become too trusting of the voices on the other side, and they're always, and if they deceive you, boy, you're going to be deceived.
Yeah.
Great advice. Fucking awesome.
It's a hell of an insight. Great insight. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap this.
Yeah, that was a good one. That hour and 45 minutes flew by really fast. And we have one other story here, but I think we're going to save it for next week, this one, or for the next time we come on the air. These stories tied together nicely again. And I really like this theme that kind of is woven together, that there's this, again, a rising. There's a rising from something very ancient that's coming back again. And with both the Eastern and the Western tradition again.
And can I ask people, you're not going to put yourself in any danger, don't worry about this, but can I ask people to visualize that trucker convoy in Ottawa carrying with it cement, sand, and gravel with the purpose of building a concrete tomb for the pathological forces? Just keep visualizing it. Now and again, a few times during the day, those trucks are carrying cement, gravel, and sand, and they're building a tomb to entomb the pathological forces in Ottawa. And don't worry, you're not doing a spell or anything. You're just helping to create an energetic force in the psychic field there that will cause. Now, obviously, they're not going to build a tomb, but they're building a psychic tomb that will have because so much of the pathological and the psychopathic control grid is under siege now by these truckers. And this could be a chance to put it in its tomb for a few decades and bury it. So just visualize trucks going to Ottawa full of cement, sand, and gravel, and they're going to build a gigantic tomb for the psychopathic control grid. Help them psychically.
So let it be done. Okay. Well, this has been a wonderful one. Timoney, do you want to end this off?
Yeah. Thomas, thank you so much for doing this with us as always. It's always wonderful to see your smiling face. And thank you everybody over in the comment section. I missed all of you guys. I'll see you again soon. Yeah. Thank you all for keeping it real and keep it strange.
Bye-bye.